We'll back up a little bit. My apologies. I think that's the first time I've done that in 10 years of doing workshops. Okay. There's my screen. Let's hide this. I'll go back. Let's go back. So I had this image open in edit mode. And I was just talking about my subject matter here, and I was focusing on just the fact that my subject matter has a little bit of these darker sections underneath the eyes. And so what I want to do is I want to open this into the face edit tool and sort of talk a little bit about this before we sort of talk more about the actual custom method that I think is really effective for editing this image. So thanks for your patience. Sorry. Okay, everybody can see my screen now, hopefully. Good. Okay, great. Um, Face Edit is a component of the filter menu. This filter menu on the left here is typically what we would describe as a series of destructive adjustments. And what I mean by that is that when I make a face edit adjustment to my image, what it's going to do is it's going to overwrite this layer being my base image. That's fine if I'm working in one session and I want to maybe undo an adjustment, undo that face edit. But as soon as I go to save this image, I lose that like record or history of adjustments. So I typically like to say to people when they're working in something like the face edit tool or working with these filter menus to just make an active duplication of their layer. And the reason why I suggest this is because when I go to make those face edits, that adjustment is going to be applied to the layer, not the overall image. And so that way you have a record of your adjustments as you make them. So just for posterity's sake, I've added a duplication. So duplications can be added using this duplicate layer icon right here, or you can right click on a layer to duplicate it. And you can also right click to rename it. And so I'm going to rename this layer and I'm just going to call it face edit. And then in parentheses, I'll add descriptive. So there's my layer here. So when I open up the face edit tool, which is at the very top here, you'll notice that it's sort of added in with this section that says AI, where these are kind of algorithmic adjustments to your images, using sort of algorithms to adjust or make changes to it based on the placement of characteristics of the face. So when I open up face edit, this tool allows me to make a variety of changes. And this is well beyond the scope of this workshop to talk about all of the changes. But if you see here, there is a section where it says edit face, edit AI points, and edit hair mask. The hair mask is literally a mask that goes over top of the hair in our subject that in this case, the tool determines using that algorithm that I mentioned. And then edit face points or AI face points. This is actually, again, a product that is created for us when we open up the tool that sort of asserts where these characteristics of the face, like the chin, the cheeks, the eyes, the eyebrows, that sort of thing. So a marker is placed on our subject, and we can adjust these if they're in fact wrong, but in this case, they're not. They're perfect. But that when I go to actually make edit face adjustments, so adjustments using these various tools that follow in this dropdown here, what it's actually using is it's using those reference points that the AI edit AI points has created on their face. So when we're talking about skin, for example, which is what we're when we're looking at these bags underneath the eyes, that's kind of what we're referring to here. So when we adjust something like, I don't know, crow's feet, which exist on the left and right portions of the eye horizontally, if I was to increase these values, for example, you can see that it's a bit, maybe it's clear if I zoom in, but you can see that it blurs and slightly lightens the area to the left and right of our subject's face. And that's actually utilizing that AI points that I mentioned earlier, where it's referencing the I guess the rightmost and leftmost points on to sort of customize this section of the face. So the other thing is just to note, if I'm smoothing something like these crow's feet, I can also, you'll notice that when I increase the slider, this slider will adjust it in such a way that basically they both operate at the same time, like together as a linked pair. but I can unlink them, and that allows me to sort of select a degree to which I want the left and right crow's feet adjustment to be applied. And as you can see, they're slightly blurred here. And if I wanted to, add, in this case, if I wanted to also adjust the wrinkles that appear on the underneath the eyes, I could do that as well. So I could increase this value. And you can see that it does that. One of the things that I think that maybe isn't perfect for this subject in particular, barring any other changes, is that it also blurs that section. And so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about effects that don't do that. But and then this also gives me the ability to click this link icon here and then like reduce the amount on one side if that was what I wanted. So this tool already exists and it's automated. And what we're going to be talking about today is a more in-depth and more manual process of doing this that is going to produce better results than this. But there is a way to do this already automated into the AI face edit tool, which is under the filter menu. Something I might do actually is I might even just smooth some more of my subject's face. And when I do that, when I use this smoothing slider, you'll notice that that actually kind of justifies the adjustments that I've made here to the crow's feet and also to the under eye wrinkles. Because overall smoothing of the face is going to make those adjustments seem more situated, or more, what would be the term for it? Like correct for the composition. So there's a bunch of different tools we can use here just to sort of not to jump out so quickly. Some other things that we can do within this tool as well. This is just skin adjustments, and ultimately all I've done here is make some skin adjustments that smooth the subject and remove some pre-existing wrinkles. But if I wanted to make some changes to the eyes, for example, and there is so many functions of this tool, I can, slightly increase or decrease the size of the eyes. This is a really comprehensive and interesting tool, and allows me to make some some pretty exaggerated edits to our subjects. But if I wanted the eyes to pop in such a way, I could do that. If I wanted to sharpen the eyes themselves in our subject matter here, I could increase this slider, and that makes those eyes pop, especially against the subject that is already blurred. The sort of more porous parts of their face are blurred. That's going to really draw your attention towards the eyes. So my point in showcasing this is that when we talk about wrinkles and engaging with our subject matter, there's already some tools in ACDSee that do this that are not fully automated, but they are less manual processes than what I'm about to discuss moving forward. But we can do this, and if we wanted to, we can go through and we can actually save particular presets of these adjustments. So if I had other photos of the same person, I could utilize these same tools. For example, I could save this preset. I have this guy's name as Arthur. I could name this Arthur Face Edit, for example, click OK, and then I can actually apply these same adjustments to other images of our subject, Arthur, in the future. So this gives me a quick way to sort of start the editing process of a face using a preset that we've created with his face in mind, given that we know that this subject had like darker, sections underneath the eyes. So this is a tool that's really useful. That being said, it's destructive. So when I go to click on this done button here, and it's going to apply this adjustment, you can see that that adjustment is going to be applied in such a way that is now overwrites this object here. So this base layer that I was talking about. Sorry, just a second here. So when I made those adjustments to the face edit tool with the face edit tool, my topmost layer here, the one that I renamed face edit, has been adjusted, has been changed. So if I was to navigate away from this this file, and move away, just to sort of reiterate, I have a history here that includes this AI face edit adjustment. But if I was to go in and save my file, let's just save it as Arthur face edit. It's going to write what I call an ACDSee file. And this ACDSee file is functionally, it is a file where I should be able to adjust edits that are non-destructive, I should be able to edit them in the future. So if I navigate away from this subject matter, and then I was to go back into this, sorry, one second, I'm just going to double check something. I just want getting a little outline around the edge of my video here that isn't ideal. Not certain what it's from. Just want to remove that section if I can. Yeah, I don't think it's anything that I can interact with. Weird. Okay, well, we'll continue, but I'll just note that that's what's happening here. So if I reopen my file here, my ACDSee file, you can see that my face edit is present here. It's on the topmost layer, just as it was before, but the difference being that I've now lost my history. So if I wanted to undo that change that I'd done previously, I actually can't do that. And so when I recommended, whenever I'm dealing with a destructive adjustment, I always like to make a copy of the base image layer that I'm interacting with because then I have that base image layer to edit in the future. Um, the other thing is that when I save an ACDSee file, all of this layer adjustments, all of these things will be saved. But like I said, these filter adjustments from the filter menu, these won't. This isn't something that I can necessarily directly interact with the changes that I've made. So unlike what I'm going to be talking about now, which is the adjustment layers section here, adjustment layers are fully non-destructive. I can go in and I can tweak minor little things and come back to this file in the future and then change those elements at any point. So there is a difference between these two functions, and I like to drill home that this is the case. So here's our subject matter. We have made a sharpness adjustment to the eyes. We've smoothed the crow's feet and the wrinkles. As you can see here, it's a pretty dramatic change, one that maybe wouldn't be something that you'd want necessarily. You can obviously adjust when you're in the filter menu. You can maybe tweak those so they're not so egregious and not such a dramatic change, but you can see that we have made adjustments to this image here. Now I want to pivot and talk about the sort of manual and non-destructive process of dodging and burning. Um, let's just hide for the time being this layer. I'm going to put it on the bottom, and then we're going to just call this our layer, our original layer, and we'll interact with this one directly. So some of you might already be quite familiar with dodging and burning. It's kind of like a classic method to, yeah, I guess lighten and darken. It deals with exposure adjustments, and to a certain extent, it deals also with curves. But it's a way to, take an area of your image that is dark and brighten it, or alternatively, take an image of take a part of your image that's dark and further darken it. This is sort of used either correctively or it's used to naturally highlight or re-emphasize already pre-existing elements of your image. JQ asked, oh, just a heads up, if you can ask questions in the Q&A panel, it makes it a lot easier for me, but I can answer your question. JQ said, can you show your original screen? Original screen. Oh, original image for comparison. So this is the original image we're looking at right now. The image that I've tucked underneath this filter one that I made, that's the one right here. So that's the adjustment right there. And then the original image is going to be the one that I'm going to be using moving forward because we're going to make some non-destructive adjustments to it. But that's sort of the difference between the two. Mostly being a real smoothing, almost a blurring that's occurred on this particular face edit adjustment. So hopefully that clarifies. Okay, so like I said, dodging and burning is kind of like a classic method by which to where is it here? I believe it's under lighting. Yeah. Um, just to be clear, dodging burning, I'm going to be showcasing it as an adjustment layer, but it's also a function of exposure and lighting. Again, this is another filter, so this adjustment would be destructive, so we're going to avoid this. But this is ultimately what we're going to be doing to our image. We're going to be lighting certain parts of our image and darkening others. So I want to draw your attention to our image here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add an exposure adjustment to this image. And the reason why I want to add an exposure adjustment is because exposure does something similar to the dodge and burn effect, where it allows us to add light to parts of our image, or inversely, it allows us to darken parts of our image. So if I do that, what's going to happen is this exposure adjustment is going to pop up. And if I was to, for example, increase the exposure, you can see that this effect would be applied universally, meaning it's applied to the whole image rather than parts of the image. And just as I go through here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep saving my ACDSee file, because when I save that, it actually, this is something that I can interact with just non-destructively. And what I mean by that is if I was to navigate away from manage mode and then back into this ACDSee file, right? What I can do, unlike that adjustment that I did to the face edit, which now is kind of locked and set, and I can't really adjust it, this exposure adjustment is something I can edit. So right now it's set to 48, but if I wanted to reduce this exposure to say 55 or 57, I could do that. And that's because these adjustment layers that appear in this little panel underneath here, underneath the layer panel, and all of the subsequent adjustments actually that appear here, like the ability to add masking and duplicating our images and adding blank layers and effects to our images, all of these things are non-destructive. So I can edit these values in the future as I see fit. So we have an exposure adjustment added to our image layer here. One of the things that will be obvious is that this effect is applied universally. So if we look actually at our exposure adjustment in the window here, you can see that there's this white box that appears to the left of the exposure, the word exposure. When I click on exposure, you can see that the actual tools values pop up. So the ability to add contrast and the ability to further add exposure. When I click on the what we're going to call as an image thumbnail or adjustment thumbnail, this mask here, when I click on this mask thumbnail, you're going to see that this box pops up. So there's actually different tools if I'm clicked on sort of the actual function itself, the exposure function, or its properties, the mask properties. So mask properties are going to pop up. A mask is a way for us to make selective adjustments in regards to exposure. Masks allow us to make selections of our image and apply a degree of effect based on whatever we're using. So in this case, I'm talking about exposure, but if I wanted to make a vibrancy adjustment, you can see that that vibrancy adjustment also comes with this mask properties box, this mask thumbnail that I'm talking about. And so when I click on something like vibrance, I could saturate my whole image in a horrific way if I wanted to. But I also have the ability to click on and to set various properties that this vibrancy adjustment has. I'm just going to delete this because it was just for example, but coming back to this exposure adjustment, wow, doesn't it feel like that went from black color to black and white there? That was crazy. But I have this exposure adjustment here, and you can see that that exposure is increased to a value of 28. Now, when this thumbnail here, this mask thumbnail, is displaying I guess a hue or not a hue, sorry, a tone to us, and that tone is white. So it's a white box. And what we can think of is we can think of this white box as almost like an overlay of this image here. So this white box tells us that when we're looking at this image here of our subject, it tells us that this exposure adjustment is being applied to the whole image. Now, this is pretty cool. When we click on our mask thumbnail section, so we click on this box here, what I can do is I can also click on this invert button. So when I click on this invert button, what's going to happen is this box here is going to turn to black. When it does, the exposure adjustment is turned off. So you can still see that this exposure is set to 28, so which means that the exposure has been increased. Our image has been made more bright, but the effect is no longer applied. So if we look at this little thumbnail box here, we can see that it's black. And then when we look at our image here, we can see that, well, that exposure adjustment is no longer applied, right? It looks like the original image. For reference, that's what it looked like before, right? With the exposure increased. This is what it looks like now. So this box here tells us some extremely valuable information about the status of an effect. This box tells us that black turns the effect off and that white, inversely, turns the effect on, regardless of the settings of the exposure. So I'm going to crank this way down. We're going to darken our image significantly. Negative 100 exposure, it's quite dark. When this white box is turned to black, what's going to happen is that this effect, this exposure effect, is going to be turned off. And when that effect is turned off, what we're visually referencing is the status of the image that's beneath it. So if I turn this off, you can see that really all I'm seeing is the original image without any effect applied, because the effect layer that's above it has been basically hidden from view. That when we change that box to black, it hides that information. And when we turn this box to white by inversing it, it turns that effect on. It shows us that effect. My point being is that what I'm going to showcase to you next is that we have the ability to select where this effect is applied. Currently, I'm just kind of turning it on and off like you would a light switch, right, in a room. But what I'm not showing you right now, and what I'm about to show you, is that you have the ability to actually direct that light. I have a little light that you're not seeing here. We have the ability to direct a light using this function, the selective function of our brush. We can brush on or select parts of our image to showcase and hide. So let's showcase what I mean. First and foremost, let's turn this mask off again. That's very bright. There we go. It's a bit better. If when I do that, you can see that this effect has been turned off, and we have the ability to paint on this effect in parts of the image that we want. So we were talking earlier about addressing these sort of under eye bags, and we can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom into my image here, and this is going to make it easier to make a selection of my, or to make a mask selection here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate up to my brush tool, and the brush tool allows me to paint on, in this case, the inverse color, which is going to be white, onto our mask. And when we do that, what's going to happen is it's going to allow me to show this exposure adjustment in the area that I've selected. Basically, when I paint white onto a black area, it's going to turn that effect on for certain areas. One of the things I want to be pretty mindful of is that I'm not clicked on my original layer. So when I'm clicked on my original layer and I brush on white, you can see that, oh wow, whoop-de-doo, I have two white lines underneath my image. And they're actually, pardon me, visible in the thumbnail here. That's not what I want. I just want to say this is a common error where people have the wrong layer selected when they're going to make edits. Inversely, when I'm actually selecting this mask, which is what I want to be selecting, this guy right here, that's when I'm going to apply this effect, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have the brush tool selected. I have a foreground color of white selected. White is going to represent the ability for me to paint the effect on versus to paint the effect off, which would be use black. But we already have a black mask, which means that everything has been turned off. So there's no need to paint with a black brush yet, at least. And then I'm going to have, I don't know, middling size on my brush stroke. I do want to increase the feathering. I want the effect of this to be applied in such a way that's gradual. Hopefully all of you can see my nib highlighter, but basically there's this hard circle in the center that's going to be the source of the effect. And then we have this kind of like almost checkered line that appears around the edge of it. And this checkered line dictates to me almost it'll gradiate the effect outwards so that it's strongest in the center and weakest in or weakest at the edge. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to apply this effect with opacity, and maybe I'll set this to like about 70. With opacity is going to allow me to brush over and over and over on top of it. In this case, opacity is going to slightly reduce the effect. Rather than a full-on opaque brushstroke, will have the maximum effect applied. But I don't want that. I want it to be slightly subdued. I want to be able to paint on gradually. So we're going to reduce the opacity when I do that. If I was to just paint on right now, what you're going to see is I'm going to paint on and the exposure is going to be dramatically reduced. We're going to make them look very ghoulish, but I'll show you how to change that in a moment. So this is a reduced exposure painted on our subject underneath the eyes. Hopefully everybody can see what I mean when I said it means he looks ghoulish. But this actually gives me, now that it's painted on, the ability to change the effect. Keep in mind that when I had set this exposure earlier, and I'm going to click on the exposure adjustment, note that when I do that, you can see that under the thumbnail, the mask thumbnail here, there are these two white dots. Well, that white is evocative of where we painted on our subject, meaning that the effect of exposure, a reduced exposure, has been applied to our subject and it is visible right there. If I was to increase this value, this is how we actually get the effect to be applied in such a way that reduces the harshness of that under eye effect here. This, like the dark sort of circles underneath his eyes, we can sort of slowly reduce that. For contrast's sake, this is what it looks like without it, and this is what it looks like with it. You can see that there's some sections right here that I targeted that I don't want necessarily to target. It darkens it too much or lightens it too much here. So what I can do is, while I still have my brushstroke selected, while I still have my exposure thumbnail selected, what I can do is I can use the opposite mouse button, I guess in this case, the right mouse button, to just reduce it in that area. And the same can be over here. I'll just use it to reduce it in that area. And I can at any point increase feathering if I want to sort of gradiate this effect outwards a little bit. And I can just go in and paint in this area. This is all non-destructive, meaning that this exposure adjustment can be edited as many times as I want. In fact, I can also change the exposure. So if I wanted to really dramatically increase the exposure in this area, I could do that. And you can see that because I have an opacity set, you can see the variation of these brushstrokes, the area that I was targeted initially, and then I slowly reduced with the tool. You can, here, I'm going to reduce, well, I can reduce the flow. And so this, again, is another tool that allows me to sort of paint almost these layers over top of each other, similar to what I'm describing with the opacity. I don't use flow to be honest very often, and the reason why is because oftentimes reducing the opacity of either the layer or the tool itself is going to be enough. But you absolutely can adjust this, and what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to paint over top that effect more and more. I would play around with these settings, but basically it would make more sense if I had like a solid color so I could show you the degree that flow is affecting it. But just this degree allows you to have a certain degree of, almost applies it as if it was layers of wrapping paper, where the first layer of wrapping paper is made darker by application of a second layer and a third layer. But initially it's going to be quite thin. And so a lowered flow is going to give you more control over that. But like I said, I don't necessarily need to engage with that because I'm mostly using the opacity of the layer itself and also the adjustment here to do the same. Also, the other thing is I don't need an exposure set to 100. That's huge. So right here, I have my subject matter. I've added an exposure to underneath the eyes here. Maybe what I'll do as well is I'll just brighten up over top of the eye here as well. So I'm just going to paint this on right here just to pull these eyes a little bit out of darkness here. And then you can see if I zoom out, maybe if I do a side by side, sort of this is what the image looks like without, and this is what it looks like after with that effect applied. It kind of pulls these eyes out of that sort of dark circles underneath and allows me to functionally dodge our subject matter. So when I'm dodging, what I'm doing is I'm brightening this area, and we're getting that effect by the process of using this exposure, this increased exposure. Just a note that, so I can increase this value, right? That's going to increase the effect. I can decrease the opacity. So this gives me the ability to increase or decrease those values, and that's going to lighten or brighten the effect, basically. The other thing that I can do is if I want to get a really extensive effect, I can also apply to this exposure layer a dodge effect as well. So I'm going to dodge, I'm going to reduce the effect here. And as you can see, when I dodge, that is excessive, like it's popping too much, right? And so this is when I would maybe blend or use the opacity to blend the effect. But if you're finding that with full exposure, that your effect is still not strong enough, you can actually use a dodge blend mode to get more pop in that area, which is up to you. It might be what you need, but we can functionally dodge without that blend mode applied to this particular exposure. So just keep that in mind. So inversely, so if I want to quote unquote burn my layer here, all that would be required here is actually a reduction of the exposure. So I can burn in our subject right here. And maybe this is where we would want to apply some degree of a slightly increased contrast, but I could burn in the subject the same way. So obviously I don't want to do that for this subject matter. It sort of, again, makes my subject matter look quite ghoulish. But the point is maybe you have a part of your image that's already quite dark that you want to what's the word for it? Further exaggerate. For example, if I was to create another exposure adjustment and I was to right click on my exposure and set the mask black and reduce the exposure, maybe I could take something like this section of my person's neck that's already a little bit underexposed and further sort of, in this case, further exaggerate that darkness to sort of pull my face and give it almost a bit more depth of field here, give it a sense of, sorry, dimension is what the word I'm looking for. But in this case, you can take that and invert the exposure here to get the same effect. The other thing that you might be wanting to do is to soften the wrinkles themselves so that first and foremost, I guess what I've showcased to you is that we can get that dodge and burn effect. And that dodge and burn effect can be generated in such a way that's non-destructive, kind of unlike the filter menu itself. And this is with the benefit of to sort of address or to remove those under eye bags that we have in our subject matter. If I was to navigate away from this image, one of the things that's valuable about saving your image as an ACDSee file is when I navigate back into this file, I have these layers present. And maybe at this juncture, I actually don't want to have this darkened layer of around the edge of this person's chin and the side of their face. Maybe I don't want this effect. So I could at any point remove this value if I wanted to. So what I'm showcasing to you is unlike these filter tools that have a degree of destructiveness, we can go in and we can dodge and burn our subject matter to remove these sort of like almost under eye bags or imperfections, or basically dodge and burn our subject matter in such a way that's non-destructive. So let's now take a look at these sort of under eye bags that we have here, and let's look at maybe a way to sort of gently decrease these values without changing our image in such a way that's really intense, like this example. This was our destructive adjustment using the face edit tool. What I'm doing here is I'm now going to just try to address these areas right here and to smooth them out a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate my original image. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename my original image as a frequency separation. Frequency separation is a way for me to sort of separate the texture from the color in my image. And I'll show you what that means in a moment here. But we're going to make a frequency separation on this layer, and that's going to allow us to smooth these parts underneath the eyes a little bit. So we have this layer. Again, this is the layer that appears above our original layer here. And right now they're both turned on, so there's not any difference between the two. They're functionally the same. But if I right click on this layer and I click on frequency separation itself here, what I'll do is it'll open up this window here. And this window allows me to see what this image looks like with this frequency separation effect applied. So high frequency is going to showcase the texture in areas of extremely high, I guess, tonal contrast in our image, versus low frequency showcases differentiation between hues in our image. And so when I set this, one of the things that I want to get is I want to get this like effect that almost looks like a grayscale image, which emphasizes these sort of points of high contrast in my image. What I ideally don't want to see is when I'm setting this high frequency, what I don't want to see is any degree of color start to come through when I set this. So when I increase the blur radius to 19, you can start to see the color pop up in our image here. And that's not what we're after. So my frequency separation ideally is such that I see my image, it appears to be broadly grayscale, and I'm starting to see this little a little increase in this contrast in my image. We don't need to worry too much about the low frequency layer for this. I just want to showcase that what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be splitting this original layer into two separate layers. One that's going to govern the texture in my image and one that's going to govern this differentiation in hue. And when I click on done, note that this is a destructive adjustment, which is why I made a duplication of my original layer. You can see that my layer here, oops, let's just turn that off for now. You can see that I have a version of both of these layers, one that has the hue as, but also a degree of blurred aspect to this image, and then one that is this kind of textural layer that doesn't have that hue associated with it. When both of these layers are turned on, they're going to appear like my base or original layer. So they're going to look very similar to that of my original layer that I have here. So I'm just going to turn all these layers on. The benefit of this, and one of the cool things about this, is we can interact with these layers individually. Let's turn this off again for now. So what I can do is, oops, make sure I'm turning that off. What I can do is I can go in and I can use this high frequency layer, and I can actually make adjustments to it or repair this layer to sort of remove these wrinkles that appear underneath this layer. The same is the case for this blurred layer here. So we're going to attempt to sort of reduce the effect of this under eye wrinkle here. And we're going to start by doing it with the high frequency layer itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this high frequency layer and I'm actually going to open up, let's see here. I'm going to open up the repair tool. So when I do that, this gives me the ability to clone, heal, blended clone, or smart erase functions of my image. And the one that I'm concerned with and the one I want to use here is I want to use the blended clone tool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through, I'm going to click on parts of my skin that allow me to kind of slowly remove that section here. And I'll do that here as well. I can just go in and I can go through and remove some of these sections. And so I have my subject matter now with this blended clone function sort of taking out those under eye bags. So if I click done on this, you can see that I've gone through, I've right clicked on a part of my image that didn't have that hard lines, and then I've left clicked on another part of my image to sort of add in this section here and functionally remove those two lines there. Now this may prove to be a bit too egregious, but we'll give it a try and see what happens. So here's my image, and then if I add that layer underneath, I have the combination of the two, which is going to be distinct from this one. This one still has those hard lines underneath the eyes, whereas the one that I just finished here doesn't. It smoothed off those wrinkles. There's still those under eye bags there, but if I actually apply this exposure adjustment, and if I was to tweak this exposure adjustment, maybe slightly reduce the opacity on it, it's going to have the effect to gently remove, or rather to brighten that part of my subject matter. So what we can do here is we can actually, I'm going to save this image, and I'm just going to showcase the original image and the second image here. If I go to manage mode and I click on this one, and I believe I have my original one here. Let's just showcase a little side by side of the effect here. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know if I need this comparison listed though. Let's see here. So you'll be able to, oh, let's turn the histogram off. There we go. You should see that, so our original image is on the left here. So this is quite a bit more subtle than the application of the face edit that really blurred out that part of our subject and smoothed the skin versus, so our original being on the left here, and then our adjusted image on the right with, you can see that, we've slightly reduced the amount of wrinkles underneath these eyes, and we've also just brightened up around the eyes themselves. So it's a much more subtle application of this. Still looks like our original subject, doesn't look like an anime character, but it has that effect applied that's really brightening. That we use that dodge and burn effect. In addition, we use that frequency separation tool to just kind of take out a little bit of the texture underneath the eyes. And this is something that in the past I've extensively talked about, the frequency separation tool for the use of removing skin blemishes, zits, that sort of thing, other wrinkles. But in this case, all I've done is really just edit the topmost high pass layer, that texture layer. Typically, when I'm addressing things like zits, where they leave a redness around them, I would also address that low pass layer here. But I don't need to do that here because really all I'm trying to do is to address that little line that appears here, that little sort of extensive. And again, all of this is subjective and whether or not my person looks better and, than the original, completely up. And then, I'm just showcasing that this tool is, these tools rather are really effective and at sort of addressing these concerns. Not trying to make like a qualitative statement about whether or not they, this looks, I hope it does look quite a bit more natural, but I don't want to make a statement about whether or not you should necessarily, remove these characteristically defining lines on people's faces. But Peter asked, how did you pull or access frequent separation from your layer? Yeah, so we'll showcase how to do that. It's pretty easy. There's two windows by which you can do this. So I'm just going to navigate back to my file here, and I'll show you sort of a before and after before I showcase Peter's question. So I'll pull this one to the top. So here's the changes that I made versus here's the changes that Face Edit was able to make. And you can see that there's a significant difference between the two. To me, to my eye, the Face Edit tool, while really effective at making really quick and almost like seamless edits to multiple images, you can see that there is too much of a blur effect here. And, this to me feels like if we're really interacting with their subject matter and we're doing like family photography or we're doing model photography, we'd really want to be particular and granular about our edits to those images. So Peter asked, how do you get to frequency separation? That's a great question. So I'm just going to hide these layers. I'll pull my original layer to the top. So you can get to frequency separation two ways. I believe you can go to layer from the top menu bar, and you can see that frequency separation is here. The key for it is Control-Shift-F. And when you click on that, it's going to open up this window that allows you to define the degree of separation between the high pass layer and the low pass layer. The other thing you can do is simply click on a base image layer itself and click on frequency separation. And that's located right underneath this original layer here. Just a note that I don't believe you can do frequency separation to layers that aren't image layers. So if you click on a mask, it's not going to allow you to do a frequency separation of it. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to pop into the Q&A panel? But that sort of covers what I wanted to cover today in that, uh, there's a couple different ways that we can get this effect of this similar to what we would try to get in this face edit tool. The way that I described to you today was a non-destructive method. This differentiates it from something like the dodge and burn tool that would be in the exposure and lighting adjustment. I've showed you how to paint on this exposure effect in such a way that is going to apply it non-destructively, and then several ways to adjust those values. And these are functions that, in this case, I can, even though I've opened and closed this document several times, I have the ability to adjust these values. So if this exposure adjustment, I wanted it to be more subtle, I could reduce the exposure on this darkness layer that I have, this darkened exposure layer. So these things are repeatable. Okay, I think Ray asked, what does flow do? I'm curious to see, I'll show you what it does, or my perception of what it does, and then let's actually have a look at what the help tool says it does. I'm just going to add a blank layer with, let's just add a white color to this layer. So I've just got a white blank layer. I'm going to click on the brush tool. I'm going to decrease flow. And let's paint on with blue. So versus max flow versus low flow. Let's see here. That is a gradual, there's almost like an edge to that there that I'm not loving, but let's see here. Help tools. I always forget the function of flow when it comes to the brush. Yeah. Okay, brush tool. Use the flow slider to adjust how fast the effects build up with each brush stroke. So I think a lower flow, so flow set to like 7 here, is going to mean that it's going to have a very low effect of this application applied over a series of brush strokes, whereas a high flow is going to basically produce the maximum effect upon its initial stroke. So if I was to reset let's see here, just remove this layer temporarily, set a new layer, just make it white again. This brush stroke, when applied with a it's full opacity just to apply this without the flow. If I set it, let's set somewhat low, set it about 20. This, as you can see, is fainter than when I apply this effect with the full flow. So I guess the point being is that if we have this lowered flow here, then several brushstrokes allow me to accumulate a greater degree of effect over this in the similar way that what I was describing with a lower opacity. When I go to apply a low opacity and I keep applying low opacity over and over and over again, I'm getting this gradiated effect that increases the value over time. And so flow, I guess, is a way to functionally do that. When we're brushing, we're increasing the density of the color, the saturation of the color. Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. I didn't realize that I had already. Yeah, I mean, I touched on it, but Eduardo, I have a 9-year-old that I retouched by adding a blank layer using the eyedropper near the darker circles in the brush very gently to lighten, not remove the dark circles. There's so many different ways to get at what I've done today, Eduardo. Like one of the things you can do too is you can, like you said, you can just add a blank layer in of itself and paint on a particular color. So what Eduardo's suggesting is just using a blank layer itself and a particular, even just sometimes using a skin color, like whatever adjacent skin color is a way to sort of get a similar effect and apply on over top of that layer. So I can get a similar effect here. The only thing I'd recommend though is that when you do this, one thing to note is that this effect is applied in such a way that's destructive, meaning that if I wanted to redo this, I'd have to, or if I wanted to make any adjustments to this, I'd have to go back and redo this. So if you are going to do something like this, I feel like utilizing some degree of masking also gives you a greater control over that. So just something to consider as well. Yeah, so you can also do that, like you were saying, with the blur tool. In this case, I used exposure, but you can also use blur to get that similar effect in our area here. You can use the blur, set the mask black, set our adjustment to white, and with reduced opacity, just gently blur under those eyes as well. This is maybe distinct from doing a dodge effect, which we're adding light or removing light, but we can blur underneath our eyes that way as well. Um, that sort of covers it for today's workshop. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like covered or anything that they're curious about? This all I was talking about today was utilizing two very simple non-destructive tools in edit mode. One which was masking using exposure, and sort of basically setting that mask as black and then using the brush tool in conjunction with that exposure to sort of slowly paint on that increased exposure or reduced exposure. And then the next one was just using frequency separation, separating our layer into two separate sections, one high pass layer and one low pass layer, and just making a simple repair adjustment to the high pass layer, which reduces some of the intensity of those sort of like under eye marks. But that covers it today. Those would be my suggestions and ways to approach, your subject matter, and to sort of address some of these discoloration issues on underneath the eyes. Um, Pretty extensive. The other thing we didn't talk about too much, but maybe I'll do a little tutorial on it. There is a way to do something similar with exposure in develop mode. You can kind of paint on exposure adjustments as well. So this is something you can do in develop mode. But I feel like it's because of the added ability to deal with frequency separation. This is a tool that's maybe if you're gonna go through the process of editing your image in full, I think it's almost worth doing it in edit mode just because you have a greater degree of control that maybe you don't necessarily have in develop mode. Edit mode is typically used for compositional edits in a way that develop mode is used for mostly adjusting, in this case, making non-destructive adjustments of lighting and tone and that sort of thing, whereas maybe making more corrective adjustments to an image would be something you'd probably want to approach in edit mode. So maybe in develop mode, you get in the habit of adjusting your images, color, that sort of thing, and then you save that image as a file that you can then edit within edit mode. And then you do these like little situational adjustments to your image to finalize them. That would be like my workflow if I was engaging with this as a photographer. But thank you, Dan. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Not. Thank you, Einar. Appreciate that. Thank you, Murray. Thanks, Dave. That sort of covers it for today, folks. So if you're wanting to take off, that's it for today. And I appreciate you participating. Also, very much appreciate for those of you that were tuning into this at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's an early day for you, so hopefully you get to have a chance to have a little siesta later. That would be nice. Norman, when's the next workshop? It'll be next month. Will it be next month? Let me think. No, it'll be this month. It'll be later on in the month, though. It'll probably be, I haven't actually scheduled it yet. Oh, I guess I should ask that now. Is there anything that anyone wants me to cover in terms of the workshop? If there's anything that you want covered, I'm happy to do that. So you let me know if there's anything that in particular you want me to talk about. Nice. That's great, Phil. Um, what's this, Wayne? So where do we find the slider show video? Like slideshow video? We did a workshop on slideshows, I think last year, but maybe it would be worth doing one again. Let's actually write some ideas down. These are good. Let's see here. Actually, you know what? I'll use it. I don't have a pen with me, so I'll just write on a notepad and I'll transfer them. So one on slideshows. Sure. One on removing scratches. Richard, when you say scratches, are you referring to like film grain scratches from historical photographs? Is that what you're referring to? Or you were talking about removing? Okay, cool. No problem. Easy to do. Scratches, so historical old photos. Actually, I haven't done a older photo repair video in a really long time. So one on I don't do the Lexia videos, Ray. That would be Rodrigo that does those. So next time he hosts a workshop, ask him about that. But that's a good suggestion as well. One on printing. Thank you, Mike. Let's see here. Wayne's the one from last week. Yeah, there is a slideshow video on YouTube, but Richard said I've scanned photos that are over 100 years old. That's really cool. Are they negatives or did you scan positives? That's very cool. Using AI to quickly select and isolate, remove similar shaded backgrounds accurately. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Using AI to isolate, remove similarly shaded background. So using AI to remove backgrounds, objects. Um, I would love to do another one on creating AI presets. Wow, these are great. I think I'll just ask for this at the end of every workshop. Color wheel. Okay. Wow. Okay. This is actually awesome. I'm always looking for like, because the thing about doing these workshops, right, is I've done them for 10 years. Um, you never know what people want to know. That's the thing. So it's always nice to have people give you suggestions. Because like I've covered so many things so many times, and that's the thing about doing workshop content is like just because you cover something doesn't mean that it's been covered for everyone, right? Somebody needs to watch it again in the future. I'll need to do another workshop on these same face edit ones 6 months from now, and it'll be new to some new people. So oh, I see what Dean's talking about. Okay, so you guys are talking about the slideshow one. Yeah, I did a workshop last year on that, and it sounds like Rodrigo's done one recently. So awesome. Uh, oh, Wayne, he would have uploaded it to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is ACDSee Photo Studio. Let's see if he did. Videos. So we got dodge and burn, watermarks. He's probably just hasn't had a chance to upload it yet. I know that it was last week, so he might still be on that. But yeah, it'll be uploaded. Don't worry. We upload all of the workshops. It just might not be right away. Red eye elimination. Absolutely. This is great. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. Thank you, Armando. Uh, oh, thanks, Eduardo. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny. I imagine that some of you probably been watching them for a while too. Like I said, I started doing them in 2016, I want to say. So it's been a while. Got John Kershaw. Thank you so much. Sure. How to make um outdoor images call. Oh, way. Teeth whitening. Oh, teeth whitening, so easy. I could do that in my sleep. I'll definitely show you how to do that. Yeah, that's a good workshop suggestion too. Mobile sync. Yeah, mobile sync, that's a hard one because it's such a good tool too. It's so hard to showcase because you have to showcase two screens. Um, that's maybe tutorial content. It would be a bit easier to edit and showcase that than it would be in a workshop. Um, but yes, I can do some sort of content on mobile sync. That's there also is some content on YouTube on it, but it's worth covering again because it's been a while. And mobile sync is a tool that I use so often. It's so useful just being able to quickly like move your images over to your desktop computer. It's like an underappreciated tool. It's very good. Database transfer when updating versions, preparation and transfer. Yeah, and that's one that we typically try to do prior new version. We try to do that at the end of every year, like before the new product is released, but I haven't done one in a while, and it'd be worth talking about as well. Really important, very easy. Not a complicated thing to do, but worth talking about for sure. Color Wheel Workshop, I got that one. Good. Yeah. People always want a workflow video. That's a tough one too, because the workflow is ultimately whatever you want it to be. But I understand why people kind of want a direction in regards to it, especially if you're new to a software like this. Um, oh, Frank, I just did a workshop on that. Like literally, I think that was the last workshop I did. Did you participate in that one? It's watermark text and watermarks. It's on our YouTube page. It's right there. I also have a adding text tutorial that I added recently as well. So if you're curious about the text box section, these two resources are really good for that. Did you see those? Let me know if you did. Yeah, that kind of covers it. Those are all really good ideas. I'll probably write these down in something a bit more permanent than a notepad note. But yeah, Frank, the tutorial itself is quite brief and will cover a lot of your questions. If it doesn't answer your questions, there's a full like hour and a 15-minute long workshop on the subject matter. So difference between ACDSee editor and gemstone. Yeah. Post to link, please. Sure. Here, actually, I'll just link you right to our videos section on ACDC. So hopefully you can see this and grab that link there. It should allow you to click it, but if you don't, you can just copy and paste the text itself. You're so welcome, David. Okay, I should probably go. That's a good for me. I've got lots of content to cover for the next year for workshops. This is really helpful, and I will continue to ask this at the end of workshops because it sounds like that was generative. So, okay, folks, I will see you when I schedule the next workshop, which will probably be in about 2.5 to 3 weeks. Thanks so much. And if you get a lot of value out of these and you appreciate them, just shoot me a comment underneath the workshop itself. It'll be in the workshop section under probably past at the top, and just shoot me a comment. Just it's always nice to see if people get a lot out of these sort of things. So just that's great there. Okay, I'll see you next time. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. And also, um, oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, for Phil's section, like Rodrigo will do them at varying times. I try, so I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so I guess Canada's Pacific Southwest. But so when I do these videos, they're typically on Fridays at 10 PT. Rodrigo does them at varying times. The reason why he does that is so he can cover more geographic spaces. I have a tendency to just do them at this time because it works really well with my schedule. So I will continue to do these workshops. Rodrigo has his workshops at varying days and times to sort of fill in a lot of the gaps and get people that are in different time zones into these workshops as well. So yeah. Okay, I gotta go. Thank you, everybody.